This is the creepy story about the wristbands. In Korea, when the patient is taken to a hospital, a white wristband is placed on their arm. It contains their information and name. And when a patient dies, a red wristband is placed on their arm. One night in a hospital in Korea, a doctor was working the night shift. He was on the 5th floor and pressed a button for the elevator. When the elevator arrived, he got in and there was one other person in there. He casually chatted with the woman while the elevator went down. The elevator stopped at the basement and the door opened. They saw an old man in a white gown standing there. The old man was about to get in when suddenly the doctor pressed the close door button and the doors closed. "Why did you do that?" asked the woman. "I did a lot of operations," said the doctor. "I've seen a lot of patients die. And when they do, they get a red wristband on their arm." The woman was silent. "You saw it, didn't you?" said the doctor. "That old man had a red wristband on his arm." "A red wristband," said the woman as she raised her arm. "You mean like this one?" This is the scary story about the party. One day, 3 siblings decided to throw a party. Their parents are going to be gone for a couple days, and they decided why not. There was Emma, Julie, and Charlie. They got drinks and food and invited everybody they knew. One by one, people started to arrive and the party was in full swing. Everybody was having a good time dancing and talking when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Emma answered it and found a clown standing on the doorstep. She thought it was the entertainer they hired, and she invited him inside. A couple minutes later, Charlie went upstairs to his bedroom to get something, but when he opened his bedroom door, the clown was right in front of him. The clown then stabbed him to death and threw his dead body under the bed. Julie and Emma couldn't find their brother, so they went upstairs to look for him. But when they went in his room, the clown was standing there. He then stabbed the 2 girls to death and threw their dead bodies under the bed also. Hours later, people began to leave the party, and soon enough the house was empty. A few days later, when their parents got back, they couldn't find their kids anywhere. It wasn't until 2 years later that the mom found their rotten dead bodies underneath the bed. This is the scary story about the hot summer night. One beautiful hot summer night, a girl named Julie was swimming with her boyfriend in her pool. They then decided to go skinny dipping. Her boyfriend stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her. He then kissed her shoulder as they looked at the night sky, dreaming of a future together. A few minutes later, they heard a strange noise coming from the bushes, but they weren't paying much attention to it. They were so comfortable together. Just then, Julie turned around to kiss her boyfriend, but she didn't see anything behind her. She turned around and realized that her boyfriend's head was missing. It had been cut off. Julie let out a terrifying scream as his headless corpse sank to the bottom of the pool. In a panic, she scrambled out of the pool and ran inside her house to warn her parents. When she got to the kitchen, she came face to face with her stepfather, who was washing his bloody hands in the sink. This is the scary story about the ceiling fan. It was a very hot summer day, and there was a brother and sister home alone. Their parents had gone over to their friend's house for the day. The brother and sister were playing on a small trampoline in the garage, and then they moved it up to their bedroom. However, after hours of jumping on the trampoline, the brother and sister began to get very hot and decided to move the trampoline in their room with the ceiling fan. After a while, they became bored and they decided to spice it up by having a competition. They said whoever jumped the highest won. The brother went first and he jumped as high as he could, but when he jumped so high that he hit the ceiling fan and it cut off his head. The sister began to scream and cry and thought that she would be blamed for this, because it was her idea to move the trampoline in there. She then superglued her brother's head back on his body and put his corpse in his bed. When their parents got home later that day, they went up to the boy's room to tell him they were home, but he didn't respond. The mother then went over to him and started shaking him violently, making the boy's head fall off. The mother screamed in horror as her son's body lay there dead. This is the creepy story about Followed Home. There was a teenage boy driving home one night when he saw lights in the mirror behind him. For some reason, he felt like the car behind him was following him, and he began to get very anxious. The next right turn was the boy's neighborhood, but he turned left instead to see if the car was following him. The car behind him also turned left. The boy then got very worried. The boy then started to take random turns down alleyways and side streets. Each time the car took the same turns. The boy was convinced they were following him. The boy then turned onto a dead-end street and parked in front of a house and turned off his lights. The car behind the boy then stopped right behind him. Then 5 people got out, all wearing a mask. They all surrounded the boy's car, banging on it and screaming, "You're dead." The boy then sped forward, turned around, and he then left. But the most creepiest part was, when the boy looked in his mirror when he was driving away, there was no car or no people anywhere in sight. This is the scary story about the old television. A few years ago in a small town in Spain, there was a married couple who had a 6-year-old boy. There was an old television in their son's bedroom, and every night when he went to bed, he insisted on covering the TV with a blanket. His parents noticed this, and they then asked him, "Son, why do you always cover the TV at night?" The boy gave them a weird look and then replied scared. He said because that's how they get in. The parents dismissed this and thought nothing of it. One night the parents went out. When the parents returned home that night, it was well past midnight. To their surprise, they saw the babysitter crying on the staircase out loud. When they asked the babysitter what happened, she looked up at them with fear in her eyes and said, "They took him." The parents ran upstairs, and when they got to their boy's bedroom, they were horrified. Their son was nowhere to be found, and there was a trail of blood leading to the television. This is the scary story about the keys. There was a young boy named James who was walking around at a park. It was a beautiful day and he was enjoying the sun. When James was about to get in his car, he realized he did not have his keys on him. Suddenly, an elderly man came up to him and said, "Hey kid, you dropped these." James was confused on how this man had his keys, but he thought nothing of it. He said, "Thanks, sir," and grabbed the keys. Suddenly, James began to feel lightheaded, and he then passed out. When James woke up, he was in the back seat of the old man's car. He then realized neither his hands or feet were tied. The old man then noticed he was awake and tried to put a rag over his face. But James got out of the way and punched the old man multiple times and jumped out of the car. He then ran to the nearest house and made them call the police. When the police caught the man, it turned out the old man who kidnapped James was a serial killer who killed over 50 people. And James was about to be another one on his list. This is a scary story about the human game. One day a young boy went to an amusement park with his parents. He was going on rides with his parents all day. His parents went to go get food and told him to wait at the table. The boy waited and waited, but they never came back. The young boy began to get worried, and he went to the place where they were getting food. But they weren't there. He then searched the whole park for them, but they were nowhere in sight. He began asking people if they saw his parents, but nobody seemed to care. The boy then saw a closed game and decided to knock on the door on the side. Suddenly, as he knocked, the door slowly cracked open. He went inside and saw something he wishes he'd never seen. His mom and dad were nailed to a wall full of balloons dead. Their bodies were filled with darts, and the two of them were completely cut open. The boy tried to help them, but it was no use. He then told one of the workers and they called the police. When the police arrived, they had no idea what to make of it and had no idea who did it. The young boy was then put in a foster home, and not a day went by, he didn't think about how his dead parents looked on that wall. This is a scary story about the black box. There was once a young married couple who had a baby. The father wanted to name the baby Nicholas, and the mother wanted to name him Jack. They had a big argument about this issue, and as a result, the mother flew into a murderous rage and killed the father. Desperate to get rid of the evidence, she chopped them up into tiny pieces and locked them inside of a black box. Then she drove 50 miles away to a river and chucked the box into it. That night, as she went to bed, she heard a sound. Black box, 50 miles away. The woman thought it was just in her head, but 2 minutes later she heard, black box, 20 miles away. Now the woman was completely scared and then checked on her baby. Nothing was there and she went back to bed. Then a few minutes later she heard, black box, I'm coming up your street. The woman was terrified. Just then her front door opened and she heard, black box, I'm coming in your house. Then she heard her baby scream, and then black box, I'm killing your baby. Then black box, I'm going to kill you. The woman and her baby were found dead the next day with blood everywhere.